So I have a question for you, which is why did you become the interpreter?
Well, I was working as a joiner, as a craftsman when I was younger, and I lived abroad in France for many years. And for many years, people always asked me why I wouldn't work in language, why I worked still as a craftsman, and I was always wondering how could I do that. And one day I found out that there was a job called interpreter, that there was a profession called interpreter. And my first goal then was becoming an interpreter for the United Nations, actually. And actually, when I started at university, right in my first or second week, someone told me, as a German with a German passport, I could never work for the United Nations, as Germany is not in the Security Council. So there you go. I started my studies, and I was already in it, and I liked it from the beginning. But my first goal was obsolete then, and it was during studies that I recognized there's many things to do. That's how I became an interpreter. And
That's
you,
a nice story.
how did you start at Interprefy? It's quite young as a company, I reckon, no?
It is. I joined 5.5 years ago,
Oh,
and my friend actually introduced me to my boss. And I have been scheduled in interview. So during the interview, I was explained a little bit more because I didn't know a lot about the company and how the model works. It sounded interested to me. I passed the interview and I was offered to work as a remote support half time. So that was going well. And after approximately 6 months, I got a promotion as a full-time remote support at the time. And then during the couple of next months, I progressed to project manager position.
okay. So do you have to travel a lot for your job?
We used to travel a lot before the pandemic happened. Then the whole market, as you probably know, switched to online meetings and conferences and everything. But slowly, the hybrids are coming back. So we're seeing more travel and more clients interested in doing the solution.
Because that's really an interesting question for me, as I worked quite a lot with you guys, and I think I spoke to you quite a lot during sound checks. I was always wondering, are you on site or are you sitting somewhere else? Yeah, that would be the question, because sometimes I mean, we can go into topic here. Sometimes I also have questions to people on site, for example, in sports events, who will be the player on the podium. And quite often, you or someone can tell me, but there are other instances where people say, I can't tell you, I don't have a contact. So I'm wondering, are you actually on site or remote? But it's both. No?
So for these particular events that we did, I was remote and there was usually a focal point from the client that was on site. So it was communication between them and the venue and the media manager and everyone to send information to me so we can send the information to you guys. So that's usually how it works.
So it's not always that easy for you.
Exactly.
So what excites you? Excites you about your role as a project manager?
Um, Well, again, first of all, it's challenge because you have many focal points. You have the AV company that you have to, and sometimes AV companies are even split into two or three different teams. So you have to communicate with them. You have to communicate with the venue media manager for this again, and then you have a focal point from the client itself. Um, who is not even involved in the technical aspect of the competition, but still it has to go through them to get more information. So it's always a challenge to gather all the focal points and to gather all the information that everyone is going to need.
Mm, I imagine.
So question for you, and I'm gonna wing this one. So how does preparation for the conference looks on your end as the interpreter? because there are no preparation materials. So I'm just wondering, how does it look?
Yeah, well, as today we're speaking mainly about sports events. You're right. There's not so much preparation material, but on the other side, there's a lot actually. If you like, let's say football. We worked mostly on football press conferences. If you're into the sport, if you like the sport, you are already kind of prepared because you know the players, you know the teams, you know how they perform during recent times and so on. On the other hand, you're absolutely right with your question because, for example, I'm always asking press officers. That was why my prior question was so important to me. I'm always asking, is there some last minute information that I didn't get from the press? Because, for example, tonight we work on a football match, and this afternoon they had the last training, the last practice before the match, and their striker or some important player got injured during the practice and can't play tonight, which probably I still don't know from the press. So yeah, it's not always that easy. And also, second point about preparation is I find it very different. Both day, if you're working on football, you know that you're working 2 days mostly. It's always match day -1 and match day. And I find it very different and also quite exciting from my professional point of view. Those two conferences are quite different because on the first day they're talking about what's coming up, and journalists might ask any question, even non-football related, whereas the second press conference, the second day, they're only talking about the match which just happened. And so first of all, to answer your question, to prepare, you have to watch the match, of course. And then you can't prepare because you don't know what's happening in the match. So you really have to be awake and aware and follow the match.
Okay, that's interesting. Very
And
interesting.
yeah, because you don't even know. It's always like that as an interpreter, not only in sports. You never know how the person, how the speaker that you're going to translate, also on an emotional level, how this person is feeling. If a team just suffered a huge defeat, there's big chances that the coach will be quite angry at the press conference. You can't really prepare to that. Do you have the same problem? Let's say, do you have to prepare like that too? Or?
Sort of, but different kind of problems. So for me, for example, the problem comes especially when you have a big tournament, it comes from not knowing the languages.
Hmm.
So even when the match is over and all the games during the day are done, you're not done because you have to update what's coming next to prepare for that. And I guess that for you, you're also on the standby to see who wins, to know if you're gonna be assigned for the next conference or not. And that's also something that I'm really curious. How does that work on your end? Does that mean that you're booked throughout the month on a standby and you have to be available, or how does it work?
Well, let's take one of the freshest experiences, last year's Euro, which should have taken place in 2020, but because of the pandemic, it only took place last year. And we did that with Interprefy. Um, so I was, yeah, I don't know if you can say I was booked. Yeah, I was booked for German, French, and English. And then I have, of course, in the group stage, Germany is playing against these three teams on these 3 dates. France is playing these three teams on these 3 days.
Exactly.
But afterwards, it's just like you said, afterwards, from the round of 16 on, yeah, it's kind of like my last answer or to the last question. It's you always have to be on your toes and always have to be keep yourself updated and follow the schedule. And yeah, for last Euro, so I was booked for 1 month without really knowing when I would be working.
Exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, still okay. I mean, it's part of my job. there's also other clients who are asking last minute, 2 days before conference, oh, can you please come? And yeah.
But it's sort of different because it's a different experience when you're doing the press conferences and when you're doing the normal meetings with the clients.
What do you mean by normal meetings? Press conferences
Um,
are not
no,
normal meetings.
sorry. No, I didn't mean it like that. I meant when you have a schedule from 9 to 5 and you have a meeting, well, or all the
Yeah.
participants are okay.
But then also, this is completely different, also relating again to the last two questions. When I work, for example, last week I worked for a company for the Works Council, and it is like you said from 9 to 5. But I also got 2 weeks before the mission, I got preparation material about the company, about the Works Council, about what they are going to talk about, and so on and so on. So when I arrived there, I knew almost about what they would talk about what they would be talking afterwards. So.
Okay. And which one is easier for you? Because when you have press conferences, usually they're short, but you have no preparation material. You can only watch the match or follow who is going to be the lineup. But when you do the meeting, it's a lot longer, but you have the full preparation material. So which one is easier for you as the interpreter?
I wouldn't say easier, but for my personal preference, I like football, I like sports, I like press conferences in general. I know from back at university, from all my colleagues, from all my fellow students, you know what consecutive interpretation is.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can tell you that most interpreters prefer consecutive because they say it's not that stressing. You have a little bit time to think about what you're going to say. If you're missing a word, you can still ask again. And at university already, I was one of the few who prefer simultaneous. And that's the answer to your question. I prefer simultaneous in short bursts because it's for me, it's almost like, I wouldn't say an action sport, but it's really high pressure action. You don't I mean, everyone makes mistakes. I wanted to say you're not allowed to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, but you at least you can't think too much about what you're doing. You're just acting, and you're just in the thing, and I really like that a lot about it. Plus working with Interprefy and doing the remote conferences, honestly I really appreciate, because I travel a lot for my work. And I appreciate it a lot when I can stay at home, do the conference for 30 minutes or how long it takes, and then I'm done. And yeah, that's good. I guess for
Nice
you
to
it's the
hear.
same, no? You do you appreciate working remotely, or do you prefer being on site?
When it comes to the sport conferences, I prefer being remote just because you can handle a lot more than just going to one venue and dealing with one press conference. Like if I'm home, I can cover 3, 4 press conferences at the same time. And we had those scenarios, especially during the Women's Euro. So for me, it's more optimal and more productive if I work remotely. But of
Yeah,
course,
that's
if you have a
totally
big
true.
conferences, if you have a big conferences where you will have a lot of remote speakers, then it's better to be on site and work with the company over there, just to reduce the margin of error. And if something happens, it's faster for them to reach you.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I remember what you just said. I remember when the pandemic started, beginning of 2020. This Champions League season, they finished it with this final tournament in Portugal. And I remember just what you said, that I was working on 2 or 3 matches in the space of 4 or 5 days. I don't recall the details, but it was something like that, where I was telling my friends, man, without Interprefy or without the remote setup, I could have never done that, because I remember I was working for Paris and Lyon and I think Bayern. So obviously, between
Germany.
Lyon, Paris, and Munich, traveling to our press conferences wouldn't have been possible in the space of 4 days. But yeah, thanks to the new technologies, I could work on all three gigs. It was
Yeah,
really nice.
thank you so much. I remember that because there was a championship in Germany, one in Spain, and one in Portugal at the same time, and all the timing was spread out through just 1 month.
Mhm.
So that was tense, and I remember we did a lot that month.
So that was, yeah, it also leads me to my next question. What's particularly challenging for you working with sports organizations? But I guess it's the organization itself, no?
It's the organization, as you said, and we sort of already went through it. So it's organization, it's multitasking because you don't have sets of people on one venue. You usually have more than one, and I think it was up to 11, but don't hold me for that. Maybe it was even more. So that and probably the last minute changes because again you have to stay up late before the match has to end. Then the press
Mm.
conference goes. Then you have to update everything for tomorrow, which is to prepare for the languages that will come for to get a timing, to get interpreters details, so you can send them the links and everything else. And then in the morning you still have to be ready for the last minute changes, and it's also, don't forget because we're doing match day -1 and the match day. That means that you don't really have the rest day when the players have it. So after a longer period of time, you feel a little bit burned out.
Mm. Do you have a, when you're working on site, do you have a team with you, or is it only you, or is it you plus a technician and some backup? Because you could, I don't know. I know it from my professional experience. As long as everything goes smoothly, all is well. But when there is a problem, it can get very hectic because the press conference is after the match and not when you have solved your problem, for example. So yeah, that's my question. Do you have a backup? Do you have help on site, or are you completely on your own?
So you do have people who are on site, and we, I would say, in 100% of cases, you have asks for the backup equipment. So everything is already set there. The challenge here is again because you're remote and you need to be aware where the problem happens. If you're not on site, that means a lot of last minute calls. And for the press conferences, if it goes down even for 1 minute, if the network goes down, that's already a lot, the chunk of the conference missing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
So that's
when
my question actually, because I imagine in those moments, let's say there is a yeah a break of 30 seconds or 1 minute. It must be very stressing for you, you know.
it
And
is, it
that's why
always is.
do you have a backup in those moments?
They do have a backup. um, how do you say it? Again, the problem comes from the on-site team, so the people who are
Yeah,
there realizing that there is a problem because the solution is online. If they don't have online stream or something like that, it's really difficult for them to notice. And again, if you see that something is wrong, because we always have remote support team, that's one of that's the part of the question that you asked. Do we have a backup team or something? We do have, and they tell me or I know something's wrong, you're already losing time by calling people on site and telling them there is a
yeah,
problem, we need a
exactly,
backup.
exactly. Especially when the conference has already started, it's so stressing. I know. Fortunately, I didn't have too many problems in the past, yeah, not very much. But yeah, as I'm saying, when there's a problem and the conference is already going on, it's even to work, to do my job, to interpret and write at the same time, or tell someone, hey, I have a problem. I don't know, the sound is too low, or there's crackle or something like that. It's really difficult. It's really stressing now.
Exactly.
Another question, just a personal question, if you don't mind. Where are you from?
I'm from Serbia originally.
Serbia.
I live in Novi Sad. Yes.
And now you live in Switzerland because Interprefy is based in Switzerland, no?
Interprefy as the company is based in
Yeah.
Switzerland, but I work remotely.
Okay, so you're still in Switzerland.
Exactly. And we have a team spread throughout the world to cover the time zones. So there's a lot of people who are actually working remotely.
That can be really challenging to the time zones. And you
It
have to
can,
work late night, and you have to stay up, and other people go to bed or do
it
something else.
can. I had a trip to Jakarta 1 month ago, and the time difference between there and the office that's in Zurich, that was a challenge as well.
How much is it? 8 hours?
It was 7 hours because we switched no,
Summertime.
Indonesia switched to the summertime, exactly.
They switch time too in Indonesia.
I think so because I noticed from March to October when I was for the second time that there's 1 hour difference. So maybe that's because we switch times or maybe they switch times. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because I always thought it's more or less a European thing to change to switch summertime and normal time.
Don't hold my word for it, but I
No,
know that there was 1 hour missing.
it's just curiosity. Just curiosity. Yeah, okay. So yeah, one last question maybe. If you could tell me one thing that I probably don't know about your job, what would it be? I think I asked quite a few things.
So the one thing for you as an interpreter is that we are trying our best. We are always, even if the sound is not coming in the way that you would like, we always contact the person on site. We always tell them um, what to improve, how to improve. We guide them, but sometimes it's too last minute. Sometimes they're not willing to assist. So it depends. But we're trying to get all the information and everything else that you need for the press conferences.
That was a nice answer, but not really answering my question because I asked you one thing I probably don't know. So I know that you guys give your best. I know that you're always yeah, trying to help, and that you're always also, I have to say, you're always polite, because I know I'm not in certain situations, as I just mentioned before. Sometimes it's so stressful that yeah, in the heat of the moment, maybe you say, "Come on," something like that, and it's maybe not the most polite, but it's in the heat of the moment. So I know that you guys always give your best.
One thing you don't know, that's
Something
actually a
else I
tricky
don't
one.
know.
So one thing that maybe you don't know is that there is a lot of happening in the background, even though it's sort of applied. So it's not just the preparation like 1 hour before the press conference starts. It also comes again throughout the morning when you set up the equipment, when you do the first checks, when you try to organize the HB, the OB team, the venue media managers to collect everyone at the same spot to do all the necessary checks.
Mm.
That could be one, but I'm not sure.
That's yeah, that was something new that you start in the morning. Yeah, a lot of work. I think people, I don't know how you, yeah, how you perceive that. Um, People from the outside, they don't really see how much or how hard we work. Huh? I mean, for
Exactly, they
me,
don't know.
yeah, for me, it's kind of, yeah, it depends on the people. Some people are really, yeah, almost admiring the interpreter. Oh, it's so incredible what you're doing, listening and speaking at the same time and translating. No, no, no. And then there's the other category of people who say, "Come on, English, it's not that difficult. Everybody can do it. You're like a parrot." Yeah, yeah, people don't really see the amount of work that goes into it, even if it's only a short press conference.
Exactly. They just see the YouTube video clip and that's it.
Yeah. And
So
also another thing is people never recognize when everything, I mean, that's kind of a topic of our conversation here. When everything goes smoothly, it's just normal. It's how it was expected. But when there is one minor screw up, everybody will point fingers and say, "Ah, come on, that's bad quality. That's really," and so on. So, but
exactly,
that's life, I guess. Huh?
exactly. So the same question goes for you. So if you could tell me one thing that I don't know about your job, what would it be?
Well, adding to what I just said about the perception of people outside of our business, I have one fun fact that I'd like to share a lot with people. Actually, the WHO, the World Health Organization, made a study. Oh, I was still at university when they made the study, 15, 20 years ago. And actually, they made a list of professions which are the most, which give the biggest strain on the cognitive apparatus, which are, yeah, difficult on a cognitive level. And I can tell you, first one is not interpreter. What do you think is the first one on this list? The most difficult job on a cognitive level in the world?
Um, Maybe doctors? No?
Many people say that. No, the number one is astronaut slash
Okay,
jet fighter pilot.
that was
And the
my second
second
guess.
one is air traffic controller, which is really tough also
Unders
as a job. And the third one is already a simultaneous interpreter. Uh,
That's impressive.
yeah, so yeah, as I said, adding to my last answer, when everything goes well, it seems so nice, and he speaks so well, and it's so cool. But yeah, it's definitely a really demanding job.